He's back. Folks, we have Coach Carson. He's just my boy. I call him Chad. You can call him Chad or Coach Carson. But Chad, we are talking about some very important creative financing things that frankly don't get the press that they deserve. Sub 2 is really sucking the oxygen out of the creative financing space. And it is what it is. But there are some other things like lease options or even master leases that we should at least understand. And I thought, who better to give the audience a framework of what those are? So thank you for being here.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Michael. Love talking all things real estate, but creative financing in general is a lot of fun.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, why don't you start with master leases first? What are they? How can they be used? And give us some kind of frameworks and, if you can, some examples.
Yeah. So the context again is, the typical toolbox of financing is you go get traditional loan from a bank. Master leases are one of those unusual tools a lot of people don't use, but in commercial real estate, they're used a lot more often. It basically, think about the concept of you rent a house. We've all rented a house before, rented an apartment. Normally, you can't sublease it to somebody else. You have to go ask your landlord to do that. A master lease just means you rent it from the property owner. You get permission to sublease it to somebody else. And we as investors make the spread. It's also called an arbitrage. And it's basically controlling. You can think about real estate. Real estate has all these benefits. You can slice these benefits up. Well, all we're doing is slicing the cash flow or the income benefit of this entire real estate pie. And we're saying, we just want the cash flow with a master lease. We don't have to have the ownership. We could have the ownership. We could talk about that, but we don't have to. You can just make money from the cash flow of the property. The other person still owns it. You make the difference in between.
Yeah, I think a great example of a master lease done right, because again, we live in a very crazy world where there's a lot of people not doing it right. But there's this concept that really picked up over the last couple of years called Airbnb arbitrage, which, if done correctly, is a master lease, right? You go to the landlord, full disclosure, you get the insurance, you get all these things, telling them what you're going to do. That is a master lease you are signing, and then you are controlling the other side and renting it out by the day or the week or the month.
100%. That's one of the best use cases because you're adding value to real estate. This existing landlord had a long-term lease. Maybe they're getting $2,000 a month as a long-term lease. You come in there and lease it from them for $1,500. They're like, okay, I'm not having to manage it myself. And then you lease it for $3,000 on an Airbnb and you make, $1,500 in a spread. That's the general idea in that example. But that's a great example. Like if I were an Airbnb upstart, I would be doing those instead of going out and spending $500,000 and getting a bunch of debt. Like I would do arbitrages all day long and maybe mix some ownership in a little bit, but man, it's risky putting your name on a loan and getting, putting a huge down payment and maybe you don't have enough money. So like when I started doing master leases and also its cousin, lease options, which we can talk about, like I didn't have a lot of capital. So this was a way for me to use 100% leverage, sometimes a tiny bit of down payment, an option fee or a master lease deposit, but it's a tiny bit of money in, but you're using an enormous amount of leverage without a lot of risk. Because on a master lease, I could promise to pay you, Michael, 2 years of lease payments, but that's the extent of what I'm promising you. I'm not promising to buy this property. I'm not promising to, pay back a debt of $500,000. It's an interesting way to control your risk using a contract instead of just go out and borrow the money.
Yeah, the beauty of a master lease when I look at them, and again, doing them correctly is, and I think Airbnb arbitrage, when again done correctly with the master lease, is a great example because most of the time you're renting, think of it as a vacant storefront. Then you're coming in and you're adding your special sauce. It's the furnishing, it's the service, it's the game room, it's the whatever. So you're adding value to a vacant storefront. And then you're reaping the rewards, right? It is a business. It's a service-based business. It is a lot less capital intensive, although furnishings, aren't free.
Yeah.
But I think Airbnb arbitrage done with a master lease is a great business. I particularly am annoyed with people talking Airbnb arbitrage that don't talk master lease, because then what you're basically doing is you're being a bad actor. You're not getting permission. That could be canceled in a moment's notice. You could be, there's all kinds of ways. So I know plenty of people doing it the wrong way, but getting a master lease up front, fully blessed, fully approved, it's a lot less capital intensive. And frankly, it's a great business if you do it the right way.
Yeah, and I think this brings another part of the conversation. What's cool about master leases, this is a negotiation tool, and you can do this entire real estate business. I know this is how you run your business, Michael, and teach people how to do it. You can do it above board. You can do it
Absolutely.
100% transparency, and you can do it with like what real estate is one of the ultimate win-win transactions. Like I have done master leases with people who own properties, and I used it as a negotiation tool, and they were very happy with it. Like, yeah, I want to keep owning the property. I want to keep getting cash flow, but I don't, you can test it when you're negotiating people.
Mhm.
You can offer them this like test, right? You might want seller financing, you might want subject to, you might want something else, but you could test it with a master lease and say, why are you selling this? What if I were able to just pay you some rent next month? Like you didn't have to deal with the tenants. You didn't have to do any of that. What if I were the person who rented it from you and I promised you that I'd pay you for the next 2 years? I'd pay you this amount of rent. Like if you just didn't have to deal with the tenants at all. It's kind of a test close where you're saying, hey, would you do that? And you're seeing like, are they selling because they don't like the hassle of the property, or are they selling because they need the money? And if they responded to you and said, no, 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 like I don't want any more income. I need this money because I want to go buy this boat and I want to do this thing.
Yeah.
Now you know. But it's just a pretty cool, simple test close. You can just explain it in layman's terms. And sometimes they'll be like, yeah, like if you can just like get me the income, like that's what I want, but I don't want to fool with this property anymore.
Yeah.
So you can start with that. You can start with it's a very low down payment kind of entry into the property. And then you can grow from there and say, well, what if okay, so you're saying you want more skin in the game. Well, let's talk about a seller financing scenario. Maybe I could pay you $10,000 down and I'll make you pay the same kind of payments, but I'll be more responsible for the entire property. Like there's a whole host of conversations that start, but I like starting with this kind of lease option or a master lease conversation just to get the ideas rolling.
Well, let's flip the script. So we talked about master lease. I think we gave a great example of Airbnb arbitrage done the right way. But now let's kind of flip it over to lease option, because that's a little different wrinkle, a little different animal. Why don't you talk about that?
So going back to our example, remember real estate has all these benefits. You can get cash flow from it. The other big benefit we often talk about in real estate is appreciation or growth. You never know when that's going to happen, but man, if you've owned real estate for the last 5-10 years, like I have, and you have, or 20 years, you've benefited a lot from growth. The thing is that you don't have to own property in order to benefit from the growth of real estate. You just have to control it. I think it was Rockefeller or somebody said, control everything, own nothing.
Own nothing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how do you do that? You do that with creative contracts, an option contract. Now, let me explain it real simply. Just like the lease, master lease is a little bit just a variation on a lease. An option contract is just a variation on a purchase contract. It's a different type of purchase contract where it says the buyer, me in this case, I'm an investor. I give something of value, typically a deposit, like a non-refundable deposit, let's say a few $1,000s, and the seller gives me something in return. They give me the right to buy this property at a certain price for a certain window of time.
Correct.
That's the key. So you're controlling the property's price. And that window of time could start today and go for like 3 years later. It could start a year from now and then go for another 2 years after that. It's very negotiable there. But the tool, the benefit for you as a person buying the property is, again, lots of leverage. You're controlling this property. Let's say it's a $400,000 property, $1 million property. Like options are perfect for high priced properties. You can control $1 million property, maybe with a 3% down payment. So it's, or an option fee. So you have a $30,000 option fee that if this deal blows up, you lose $30,000. But what if it goes up by, $200,000 and during that time period on your $30,000 investment, you made $200,000 and you've controlled your downside by having this option. And that's essentially what it is. I can talk about some use cases. Combining it with a master lease is how I've used it. Like there's 100 ways to use options, but the way I've used it typically has been either number one with a seller. So I go negotiate with a seller, and we like I mentioned earlier, I made a couple different options. I said, a couple different closes. I could say I could pay cash for this property. They're like, no, that's way too low. I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about another way. Maybe I can't pay you $250,000 for this $350,000 property. Maybe you're not going to take that, but what if I could pay you your price you're asking, but give me time to buy it. Like give me 5 years to pay you that price. I'll pay you $10,000 today, and I'll take over 100% of the management of the property, and I'll pay you $1,250 per month. That's the master lease, right? And then I'll pay you the $10,000 for the option to buy it for your price, $300,000 or whatever our number was that I just said, for the next 5 years. Now, why would I do that? I like this location. I like this property. I want to manage it. I want to rent it, or I want to have my manager manage it. But I think this property has potential to grow. I want to speculate. And we kind of say that's a bad word typically. Speculate, don't speculate, like buy it for cash flow, right? And I agree. When you buy and you get a debt on the property, you should buy it for cash flow. But options are the perfect speculation tool, because you can do, let's say you had $100,000 you wanted to invest in speculation. You could spread it out over like 3 or 4 properties and speculate that those are going to go up in value. And if the whole world blows up, you lose your money. But if the whole world goes up and you appreciate well, you can make a whole lot of money with a whole lot of leverage. And again, you've not borrowed that money, promised to pay it back. And so I did this early in my career as someone who didn't have a lot of capital. Like I had to do this by talking to sellers, negotiating options. But another tool that I really love is I also did joint ventures with private lenders. So I found these passive investors. So let's say, Michael, you were selling a property, had a 1031 exchange, and that clock was ticking. I had this all the time. I would go to my investor friends. They're like, I need to put some of my money somewhere. And I said, well, I've got this property right here. You could buy it, and then I'll lease it back from you with an option to buy it back for 10,000 more than what you bought it from me for. So like I would negotiate a $50,000 discount. I say, hey, investor, come buy this property. I'll lease it back from you. I'll get an option for the next 5 years at 10,000 more than what you paid for it. And for them, it was finally I found my 1031 replacement property. For me, it was, I just got a private lender by using, and I controlled the entire property with very little money by using an option. So that just gives you a taste. Like it's a very creative tool. You do the same thing you always do. You look for value, you look for good properties, you look for good locations, but you're bringing this toolbox that has more tools that give you more options to do deals.
Yeah, one of the things that I hope people realize is I think we are going to go through a real estate cycle that was like 81, 82, 83, 84. These were years where creative financing was born. Robert Allen did nothing down for the 80s or whatever it was. I think today a lot of people are chasing the sub-2 track, which is great. It's thing, but it's one of the tools. It might be the biggest tool, but it's still one of the tools in the tool belt. There are so many other ways. And Chad, you're educating people on all of these. You've done these. Where can people find you?
I'm at coachcarson.com. If you're watching this on YouTube, just search for Coach Carson. I got a channel out there. There's a lot of crossover with Michael. What you're doing here is awesome, Michael, and I appreciate that. And I teach a lot of the similar stuff, but also case studies and tutorials and little whiteboard videos. So I like to get into the details and explain it. So check me out. I'd love to have you over there at my channel.
Folks, go give him a follow. Let him know you came from One Rental at a Time so he knows his time with us is worthwhile. Thank you, Chad.
Thank you, Michael.